I wanted to ask if you could give us a sense of why you've decided to run. I know that as a child, you witnessed the harshness of the carceral state on a personal level. Can you tell us a little bit more about that?
Yeah, well, we've come from a neighborhood that was very diverse, very immigrant heavy. My parents are immigrants from Palestine, and we owned a small grocery store. So a lot of the community worked in there, walked to and from school and the home and the store. So we're a very close-knit family. I have 9 siblings, and around 14, my father was sentenced to 22 years. And he and my mother had to figure out how they were going to raise my 9 siblings and I and keep our heads above water and not from becoming a statistic that says we're supposed to end up in the gutter, essentially. And that was the first time I ever stepped foot in a courtroom, and it opened my eyes to what the legal system was and how it worked. And it really inspired me to become an attorney. But I wanted to be an attorney that actually balanced the scales of justice, that addressed the root causes of problems, and ensured one system for everyone.
Right. So, I mean, tell us about your practice as a civil rights attorney. You represented a number of people, including most recently a protester in the Black Lives Matter movement who was facing charges. Just tell us about some of your cases, the motives behind choosing to go into this part of the law, and particularly about that case, if you feel comfortable.
Sure. When I first started practicing, I did criminal defense work, and I felt like there was an automation to the system. There wasn't much understanding of why things are happening. There wasn't much nuance in how cases were being resolved. The majority of cases were ending in a plea. A lot of fines and fees are attached. And so it felt very rushed, very quick, and for the permanent impact and serious impact that it has on people's lives, I wanted to do something that actually addressed the premise by which we're operating and by which the system has become automated, particularly when it comes to police violence. And so being a civil rights attorney allowed me to identify abusive policies and practices, look for these patterns, use data to change the law. And so whether it's holding police accountable or representing victims of sexual assaults or children in suspension hearings, my eye was always towards, what are the laws that need to be changed or the rules that need to be changed to ensure we're not only protecting the public, but we're holding these systems of authority accountable. And I think the protester case that you mentioned is one that's extremely important, because at the height of these protests, we saw officers showing up in riot gear, assaulting protesters. And our Attorney General Tish James had an entire hearing to document those abuses. And what this video that was captured and went viral showed is that here you have a protester or bystander recording the police engaging in misconduct, and for no reason shove her with full force, slamming her head into the ground. And the whole world saw this, right? And so this was an opportunity for our leadership to step up and call it out as wrong, and to stand with the public and say that we won't put a badge above the law.
Right. And I mean, I mentioned as we started this interview that the progressive DAs across the country who have been elected, many of them have a background purely in defense work. Larry Krasner is obviously one of the more prominent examples. How does your work in just that realm give you perspective in all you would want to achieve as district attorney in Manhattan?
Right. I think it's extremely important to come from the issue of criminal justice reform from a comprehensive perspective, one that sees the impact of one decision and how it plays out in all areas of life, because the criminal justice system does. And also, what are the instabilities that we miss before it even becomes criminal conduct? And how do we address that? So when we talk about school to prison pipeline, housing instability, social inequities that might exacerbate these conditions, victim services, supporting the healing process, things like restorative justice. That's what the civil rights background brings to this table, but also my lived experience, having come from the impacted community, having worked with our community-based organizations, activists and organizers alike to make changes in our city. This is a team effort, and it takes more than just the automation of justice and prosecution to get it done.
Right. And you mentioned your lived experience. You said, you're a Palestinian American. I mean, obviously the occupation and the brutality imposed by Israel in Palestine is in the news. And I know, you're not running for federal office, but that's an important just background to your experience and understanding of, I think, subjugated peoples and people who don't have the same rights despite the borders that they live in. It's an occupied territory, as I say. And then also you lived under a time of mass surveillance in New York after 9/11. So if you could just address both of those those historical events and living, through your experience and your lens, how that informs some of what you would bring to the office in Manhattan.
Yeah, I think, it was really interesting, meaning a lot of constitutional violations when Muslims were under surveillance after 9/11, particularly with the NYPD and their demographics unit. And as a civil rights attorney, I firmly believe in the protection of our rights, from freedom of speech to freedom to practice your religion, to assemble, to dissent. And when it's threatened, it has to be called out. And when there are injustices, they have to be called out, even if it's not popular. And that's something that I grew up believing in. That's something as a civil rights attorney I always stood for. And again, it's not always popular. It's not always easy to do. But if we're really committed to this idea of democracy, fairness, justice, and equity, then it has to be equally applied. And that's why, for me, getting to the root causes of things, understanding how we got down the wrong path, how do we recorrect or correct in the first place, things that drove us down to policies that might disproportionately impact communities of color, that allow powerful and privileged or the police officers to get away with criminal conduct, is something we have to constantly remind ourselves of, hold ourselves accountable for, and make sure that we are ensuring this one fair system for everyone.
Right. I mean, and if you don't want to dive into those waters, I totally get it. But just in terms of your experience as a Palestinian American, just that it's hard not to, I think, draw comparisons to the native population in the United States with what's going on there. The whole concept of colonialism. I mean, those power dynamics, I think, have to be in the back of your mind. Your parents must have kind of given you some semblance of their experience. Do you have any thoughts on that?
Yeah, I think, having to come from Palestine and settle here in the US and try to make a life where you are afforded equal opportunities, where you're not going to be essentially cut out of opportunities because your race or religion, is something that it's extremely important. And I think as a Palestinian, fighting for justice, fighting for your voice to be heard, for equal representation, is something that, of course, instilled in us very young, and something that I think a lot of New Yorkers who come from these marginalized communities want to fight for. And honestly, it's one of the reasons why I jumped into the race, as somebody that comes from these impacted communities that are often pushed into the shadows of society and spoken for. I wanted to speak for ourselves, right? I wanted our issues and our experiences to be front and center. And that's one of the strengths that I drew from my experience and my family's experience from Palestine.
Hi, I'm Sam Seder. You can watch the rest of this interview and more on our Peacock show, which streams at 5 p.m. weekdays on The Choice from Peacock TV.